So this is gonna be the first time that I've ever seen this scene. This was one specifically that I really didn't want to once we did it. And when we first talked about doing this, in the very, very beginning, I knew this scene was gonna come. And it was, I told you, I was like, give me a heads up when this day comes, because it's not gonna be a good one.
Well, the thing with this scene, it's super difficult scene to shoot. The first time we shot it, we did like at least 15 takes or something crazy like that. And then we thought we had it in the can. And
Well, I thought,
well, no, we all thought. We thought we came back to work and we started putting it in. And for me, there was just something that was, I felt like we could convey the same amount of emotion with less.
yeah.
And it was a hard thing to tell Troy because everybody put so much into it. And it's like, we got to do it again.
Well, I remember that
We got to
day
come back to this.
when you came back and you told me that we have to do this again. Obviously, you'll see why what we're talking about. But this is the defining moment for Joel. This is where he draws that line in the sand, where he has few moral lines left to cross. I'm so amazed with how well Hannah did, and
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult to watch just on the mocap stage. And we actually had people, after a few takes, leave the set. They were like, I can't watch this anymore, and they just took off. But from a story standpoint, it's so important to show just what the violence does and how it like rips apart this family.
well, then especially a lot of times in video games, you see blatant violence, but when you personify it and you put it on a face, especially that young face, and you see the devastation that just one life lost can do, and it's just, I mean, this was such a hard day. It was such a hard day for both of us. I mean, it was exhausting for her. It was exhausting for me.
So the opening credits, the thing with the opening, initially we didn't want to do opening credits, didn't even have the idea for this, but the jump felt too sudden to go from Sarah dying to then 20 years later.
And making up.
We found that when people watch it in succession, they're not paying attention when we start introducing Tess in the world because they're still recovering from Sarah dying. So we're like, okay, well, let's have this opening sequence that can kind of help bridge the gap. And just had the idea of just seeing this time-lapse video of fungus growing, because so much of the disease and the outbreak is based on this cordyceps fungus that spread through spores. So we contacted a group at Sony San Diego who did this whole opening sequence for us, and they actually got these fungal kits where they grew fungus like in their bathrooms and filmed this over like days to produce this thing.
So everything you're seeing is actually, it's real. It's not CG. It's not.
It's all
organic.
it's all, except for the spores at the end, which are CG. Everything is real. This whole journey is like a dreamlike state, and you constantly see people waking up, and you see this multiple chime with Joel, and it's as if he's like remembering the past. He's always having these bad dreams throughout the game.
That was always something that we had to keep in mind when we did this scene, because we shot this before we shot Sarah dying scene. So it's kind of like we knew that those were going to be in one way or another kind of butted up against each other. But this is such a great thing. Again, this was in the audition thing that we did when we were trying to find Tess. And when Annie walked in, it was just like, she walked in as Tess. We saw a lot of different people for that. And this was just such a great, because the relationship you see from going from Sarah and Joel to now Joel and Tess, it's just, I don't know, you see everything, like the house that he was in before was nicer. He looked nicer, and it's not just the years have passed, but those years that have passed haven't been kind.
This also gets into something interesting for me as a writer, which is you have a certain notion of characters or how you want the structure to be, and then once it's interpreted through actors like Troy, it changes. Like I've always imagined as Joel doesn't really care for Tess. He's completely shut down, and Troy treated it differently, which is I think he really cares for Tess, and even though he might not show it, and we just kind of embraced that. And you kind of see that later when Tess gets infected. That wasn't how the scene was originally envisioned, that Joel has such a reaction, but it became a lot more interesting to own that.
Well, and also how much this relationship changed over, I mean, time and different writing iterations and just conversations that we had about this. Even, within just in the last month or so, we've had conversations about this. It's like, what is their relationship? Because we never define it. I think anybody else would put it on the nose, they're lovers or whatever. There was one note that you gave, it's like, let's, for one specific take, and said, let's just assume that there was a fight last night over what, we don't know. This is that moment afterwards. So it was like this awkward tension between the two of us. But there's no like loving embrace. There's no kiss that Joel and Tess have. It's just such an interesting relationship.
And the challenge was to try to, how much can we convey just through nonverbal interaction?
Right.